One of the things my mom used to say to me often was, aim, life is a balancing act. And she was right. And this morning is exactly one of those examples. So David, these are the words before the sermon, so don't start your clock yet. I got a few minutes before, and then you can start. And what I mean by that, this is the preamble. I was taught in rabbinical school that there are two kinds of sermons, or two kinds of teachings. One is to comfort the afflicted. I think last night's was a comfort the afflicted kind of Devar Torah. And sometimes you're supposed to afflict the comfortable. That's what today's is. I want to own it. And I want to acknowledge that actually finding that balance is really hard, especially this year. And it is tempting to want to sort of only talk about hope and only talk about what's right and only be inspirational and only end with take courage and have hope. It's going to be okay. But the truth of the matter is, it's going to be okay because we have to make it okay. And the way that we can make it okay is to sometimes be afflicted. So I want to own that and I want to apologize, but I think it's important. The second thing I want to do is share with you a story from this summer. I was taking care of an errand early in the morning, and I have my morning podcasts I like to listen to for the news from Israel, for the news here. I have 2 or 3. They're nice, they're short, they kind of get me through my routine. On this particular morning, I needed to get out especially early. And so I was actually still listening to my podcast when I was out and about. After I finished one store, I put my ear pods back in and I put my mask back on, and I went and I opened a car door and I threw my purse in the car, and then I looked a little more closely and I thought, I don't usually leave my car that messy, and then I thought, oh, that's not my car. Yes, it was a beautiful moment. I opened the car again, I took my purse out, I looked up, and there were 3 black teens standing about 10 feet from the car. And I looked at them and I thought, oh my God, I am so sorry, I am so embarrassed, I am not usually this flaky. And they kind of smiled, and I'm sure they thought, oh, this old lady, what's with her? I got in my car, and I had this thought. Would I have been as generous with those 3 boys, those 3 black boys, if they had been flaky and they had opened my car door and they had thrown their backpack in the front seat the way I did? I know what I want to tell you. I want to tell you that, yes, of course, I would have said, oh, don't worry about it, it's fine. I don't know if that's what I would have done. And I don't know if that's what I would have done if instead of it being 9:30 in the morning, it were 9:30 at night. And instead of being lots of people around, I had felt a little bit isolated and a little bit more afraid. And after that happened, I actually knew I wanted to talk about this beforehand, but after that happened, I knew I needed us to talk about this, and I decided that the best way for us to talk about this topic, about black sons, about raising black children, is for me to invite 2 women in our congregation who are raising black sons to share their experiences with you. And I'm really delighted and honored to welcome Samantha Dubrinsky and Rabbi Yafa to our congregation. And for COVID persons, we're putting one here and one there. We're kind of keeping our distance, as it were. And I just want to say, anybody who has taken their mask off has been tested. I just want to say, so I want you to feel safe. And others chose not to be tested, but to keep their mask on. And that either way, we're grateful. So Samantha Dubrinsky and her husband, Jamil Clayton, recently located to our community. They relocated from Birmingham, Alabama, where the 2 are originally from. Sam serves as the CEO of the Springfield JCC, and Jamil is a CPA who works as an auditor at Cohn-Resnick. The couple have a 2-year-old son, Max Dubrinsky Clayton. I want to welcome you and just say to all of you, if you haven't had a chance to meet Sam or to work with her, you're missing out. And this is your first Rosh Hashanah here because you moved here during COVID. So really, it is so good to see you in person and to be in the same room with you.
Thank you.
And I want to welcome Rabbi Yafa Chase. She's the director of Western Massachusetts programs for the Harold Grinspoon Foundation. She has a master's in international development and has developed and directed organizations and programs around the world that support and empower families and children. She worked for a number of years with the Ethiopian Jews in both Israel and Ethiopia. I'm referring to Rabbi Chase as Yafa this morning because she's here not as a rabbi, but as a mom. Yafa is married to Harley, and the couple has 2 children, Ariel, age 16, and Ezra, age 10. Ezra was adopted and is from Ethiopia. So in a sense, we're talking about Ezra and Max this morning, but more. And if you're saying, Rabbi, why is this a Rosh Hashanah topic? I want to remind you that the Torah reading and the Haftorah reading were about mothers and sons. And I want to remind you that the tradition says that when Sarah heard about the binding of Isaac, that's tomorrow's Torah reading, but when she heard about it, the mere thought that something had happened to her son, she died. Because the rabbis go on to talk about that core connection between a mother and her children and the pain that they experience at the thought of it even possibly happening. And so it was with that in mind that I thought this would be a very appropriate topic, and I'm not actually wandering from the text. I'm actually staying very, very close, and I'll explain why I'm even closer than you think. So I want to turn to you, Sam, and to you, Yafa, and say, how does your child's skin color figure into your parenting?
So I first want to say thank you to you, Rabbi Katz, for inviting us to come and share our experience and our perspectives on this. It really means a lot.
Thank you.
So as you shared, my husband Harley and I have a daughter, Ariel, who's 16. She is biological, and her skin color is very similar to mine. And our son Ezra is 10 and is from Ethiopia, and he has brown skin. And so when I think about your question, I'm really asking myself, is there a difference between the way we parent Ariel to the way we parent Ezra? And the answer really is primarily no, with a little yes. So my husband and I have 3 principles that are very central to our parenting. 2 of them, I would say, are really exactly the same, and 1 is slightly different. The first is really what I'm sure all of us who are parents really feel is central to our parenting, and that is love. Right? We want to love up our children. We want to show them in as many ways as we can how much we love them, how they're loved by their extended family, by their schools, by their Jewish community, by the world. Second is really teaching them and really showing them by our own actions how we listen to our own neshama, our own soul, our own inner guidance system, as we call it. And then thirdly is really supporting them and having confidence in themselves, really believing in themselves, feeling good about who they are on every level, from the color of their skin to their religion, to their nationality, to their personality, and always feeling good about themselves. Now, this is important for both of our children. After all, Ariel is a woman, a young woman. She's also a Jew. So there may be times in life where she's judged in negative ways. And I believe that really we have a long way to go still for women and also for Jews. But I think we have an even longer way to go for people of color. And so it's important because I believe that if our child feels loved, if our child knows how to listen to their own inner wisdom, and if they have confidence in who they are, then when the world is mean, when the world is cruel, they're not going to take it into themselves. They're going to understand that this is not about them, that this is really about others, about the world.
So as Rabbi Katz mentioned, my husband, Jamil, and I moved from Birmingham, Alabama earlier this year. And our son, Max, who is Jewish and Black, is 2 years old. And so last summer, when there was so much racial turmoil and strife in our country, we had this moment of how can we raise a Black Jewish son in Birmingham, Alabama? The community that we lived in was mostly white and not Jewish. And I remember my husband saying to me one night, Sam, when I walk out of the door every morning, I know there is someone who lives on our street who doesn't want me to be here. And that was just a really, really profound moment for me, both as a wife and a mother. And so to answer your question, Rabbi Katz, my son's skin color is part of the reason that we are no longer in Birmingham. We wanted to provide him with the opportunities that every child, no matter their religion, no matter their race, no matter their gender or socioeconomic background, deserves. And we didn't feel like we could find that in Birmingham.
Yafa, if I'm remembering correctly, part of your decision to move here was the same reason, right?
Yes, I grew up fifth generation from Rutland, Vermont. My mother was the first bat mitzvah in the state of Vermont. I'm always happy to share that. But it's also a very white place and a bit provincial. And we really wanted to move to a place where we felt there was more diversity, but also really a celebration of diversity. And that's certainly what we have found here. And Ezra goes to LGA, and they are so centered around really celebrating diversity. And so we feel we've made a really good decision.
So what would you like our congregation to take away from a conversation? Understanding we're going to continue the conversation. This is the beginning, not the end. But what would you like the congregation to take away or to think about? How can we make a community for you that will feel safe, that will feel like what you're looking for?
Last summer when I was dealing with the emotions of raising a Black Jewish son, so many of my friends and family members say, well, when he is old enough to go out into the world on his own, things will be different. And yes, we hope things will be different, but it's not an accident that things will be different. It's our responsibility as Jews, as human beings, to provide that different world for our children.
So every morning when I do my morning prayers, I start with Hareini mekabel elai et mitzvah haborei v'ahavta l'reacha kamocha. I hereby take upon myself the mitzvah, of loving thy neighbor as thyself. And so what does that mean? That means really making the effort to get to know people who are different than you are, whether that's different color skin, whether that's somebody who has a different political view. But how do you do that? I actually had a difficult experience. Actually, it was during Cantor Elise and Rabbi Ben's baby naming, when after the baby naming was over, somebody came up to us and said to my son, tell me about your adoption, and tell me, is your birth parent still alive? Now, that was not a racist comment, but it was a very insensitive comment. So what I want you to think about and talk about with each other, talk about this with your family members, talk about this with your friends. How do you welcome people who are different than you? What can you do? How can you make an effort to really get to know people, and to do it with respect and to do it with sensitivity? So, thank you.
So I want to just draw on one more scene from the Torah portion, and that is when, I'll remind you, this morning, Ishmael was born. And Sarah saw Ishmael. Isaac was born, and Sarah saw Ishmael playing, and Sarah got upset, and she said, "Oh my God, these kids can't grow up together. He's got to go." That was to my mind, one of the cruelest moments of the Torah. But the truth is, why did Sarah do that? She actually did that because she thought she was protecting her son, and she thought she was loving Isaac. I don't think she woke up in the morning and said, "I want to be a cruel, I want to be a witch, I want to do something that is going to be written about and remembered as this horrible thing." I don't believe that at all. I believe this protective, motherly piece of her was saying, "I've got to protect my boy." The truth is, it was horrible what she did. It is one of my least favorite lines of Torah to read. But what I take away from it is, Sarah was capable of it. Like the same woman who we can empathize with a few verses later when she hears about what happened to her son. And that takes me back to say, we're all capable of it. I don't know what I would have done if those boys had opened my car door. I want to tell you what I would have done, but I want to admit that I'm human and that I am struggling to really hold on to the concept of v'ahavta l're'echa kamocha, which isn't love your neighbors who are like you, although some interpret it that way. It is really love your neighbor like you want to be loved. And your neighbor, by definition, is going to look different and is going to think different and is going to be different. And I want to say that, to my mind, pushing myself to really live into that and pushing myself to say there's a lot of Sarahs in me, and to make sure that the voice that is amplified is the voice that says to you, Sam, and to you, Yafa, I want to make sure that the community that I am creating is safe and hospitable, and that makes your sons, your boys, that makes black men, that makes black teenagers feel as though they're treated with dignity and respect. I may mess up, I don't want to, but I'm going to continue to be vigilant thinking about this issue, and I'm going to push us to be vigilant thinking about the issue, because it's a serious societal issue. And whereas I really want to comfort you and say it's going to be okay, I want to be the one to say to you, Samantha, it's going to be okay. I actually know that it's only going to be okay if sometimes the comfortable are afflicted. Thank you both for opening your story to us, for giving us your Rosh Hashanah morning, for being my colleagues, and for all that you do for our Jewish community. You make an enormous difference.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Shana Tova.